Welcome, future doctors, to another episode of the Future Minority Doctor Podcast with Dr. Zulma
and Marina, where we bring you conversations to empower and inspire you to contribute to your community and the world by becoming a doctor.
Dr. Marina and I, we love working with students, but at the same time, we're very busy. So when we get asked for these letters, sometimes because we're so busy, it's really hard to sit down and really try to think and try to come up with an idea. So it really, really helps us if we already have some groundwork there. So that way we start working from there. So an outline or just some key points of what will help us as a start to writing a letter. Because I will tell you, every person letter recommendation, especially if they're in the medical field or they're professors, they are so busy. I mean, extremely busy, not only with work, but also with their home life, with everything. So it's a very helpful if you come to the table with something already prepared that we can then just strengthen it and work off of. Do you agree with me, Dr. Marina?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. A lot of students in the last 2 years have emailed me. The students we work with, our application coaching program, are obviously going through that whole process of applying and getting letters and everything. And a couple of times in the last 2 years, students have emailed me and said, hey, I asked my professor for a letter of recommendation and they asked me to write my own draft. And they're like, what do I do? Right now, just like Dr. Z mentioned, from the professor or the doctor's perspective, we are so busy, right? We can barely finish the things that we have to do for work, let alone our kids and family and pets and all that stuff and personal stuff, that when a student asks, I want to say yes, right? Especially if I like that student, I want to say yes and I want to help them out. But in the back of my mind is also like, oh, here's another thing on my to-do list. When am I going to find the time to actually sit down and write it? Because in reality, it can take us 30 to 60 minutes to sit down and write a good letter of recommendation, right? And so that's 60 minutes out of my Sunday that I have to write this letter. I'm not getting paid at work to write letters, right? So I have to find the time to just squeeze that in, right? So I think the reason that more people are starting to ask students to do this is as a time saver, right? As from a practical perspective, a time saver, right? And also maybe they don't know the student as well as they'd like to, and they want the student to write about what they think are their strengths in order to kind of help them write a better letter. Now, 99% of the time, with very rare exceptions, the professor is not going to submit your letter as is when you draft your own letter. Please know this, right? Any responsible professional is not going to take what you submitted and then sign it and submit it. I think that would not be professional from our perspective, because we also want to make sure that it's genuine to us, that we have codes of conduct that we have to follow, and I can't submit something that is mine if it's not truly mine. So I would go through the letter and then edit it to give it my voice and give it my qualifications and make sure that I agree with everything that is being said in that letter, because I am submitting it under professional code of conduct that says I approved this, right? And this is my true opinion of this student. So when they're asking you to draft, it's helping them to save time, right? Helping to make sure that they meet your deadline. Also helping to get a window into what you view your unique strengths as being that you bring to the table in your application, right? So that being said, you may get asked to do this once in a while. And so we want to give you some guidelines today on how to do that if it ever comes up for you.
Exactly. And sometimes with the professors or the doctors that you guys may work with, we know you guys within a certain capacity in that environment where we're at. And most of you guys are very humble. So it's not like you're telling us all these great, wonderful things that you've done already in your past, but we don't know that. So when you do actually draft up something, we know you personally within the capacity that we've worked with you guys, but when we see what you've drafted, we're able to highlight those other things that are so magnificent about you guys that we just didn't know. But there's no way for us to know. So when you have that within your draft, it really helps us enhance our own letter about as well, because we do. When we work with you, we want you guys to succeed. We want you guys to get into medical school, right? but it saves us time, right? Whether like what should I write versus if it's there, then we're able to make it nicer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Y- All right.
So
So
what are
some of the
some
things you
things?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So some of the things that you want to include on there, you can kind of think of it like creating a draft, almost like a CV, right? Because that's what you're doing when you create a CV, right? So some of the things you want to include on there for us, but within this draft that we're for the letter of recommendation is any academic strengths that you may have. Right. Again, within the context of when you're showing us or you're working with us, we don't look at your academics and how you performed in college. So, even for you to be able to highlight some of those things within this draft would be wonderful. Dr. Marina, from you working with students, can you think of an example, maybe something that maybe a student has written within a draft they've given you that highlights their
Mm-hmm.
academics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't actually asked students to do their own drafts,
Hmm.
but I have sometimes
Okay.
asked them to just email me a couple of things that they would like highlighted. And so there was one
Hmm.
student last year who asked me for a letter. He had rotated with me during his third year pediatrics clerkship. And then he had also done volunteer work for a future minority doctor as an application editor for our program. And he had done a great job. He was reliable, he was interested. I had lots of glowing praise for him, but I didn't know anything about his academics.
Hmm.
And so I emailed him and I said, happy to write your letter. Please just like send me a bullet point or like a few paragraphs about things that you would like me to highlight in your letter. And then I took it from there. But I thought it was really interesting because what he told me was, well, performance is very strong on my application residency, but I want you to talk more about my personal characteristics.
Mm.
Like I think that I did a really great job with the students on their personal statements and editing and listening to their stories and helping to bring out their stories. So, and also I think I had good bedside manner with the patients. So he specifically told me, hey, don't
Mm.
overemphasize the academic because that's already strong, but please emphasize the interpersonal characteristics that you
Okay.
observed, and gave me some examples and some stories of working with students that I hadn't been there with his in his editing
Hmm.
sessions. So he gave me some details that I didn't know about that were really helpful for me to be able to write the strongest letter that I could.
Oh, that's neat. So that's a good point because if you already have within your application academically, you're already showing on your application, then it's
Yeah.
like, okay, this is where I need more help on. Now, say if you're a
Yeah.
student that isn't that academically strong or you're having to yourself, an example I can think of is if, say, a student didn't do so great their first year, but
Hmm.
as they progress, their grades got really good. I think that would be worth telling whoever's writing your letter because it
Yeah.
shows your growth. And I think that's somewhere where
Hmm.
that we can spin off as well. So I guess that would be probably an
Definitely.
example too.
Yeah. And what you need the letter to emphasize is going to be very unique to you, right? Like maybe
Hmm.
you've already published 3 research papers and you've already and so you don't need the letter to emphasize the research.
Hmm.
Maybe you need it to emphasize something else about your volunteer work or so, but it's also letters are typically balanced. So even in that
Hmm.
letter that I wrote for the student, I still mentioned in a short paragraph something like, as you can see from his GPA and test scores, he is a very strong student and he demonstrated his intellectual curiosity through my rotation, through blah, blah, blah. Right. But then I
Yeah.
spent like 3 meaty paragraphs talking about other things. So it's not that I didn't mention that. It was just that I didn't emphasize that, right? I
Hmm.
emphasized other things in his application. Now, when you're applying to medical school, you're going to want a variety of letters. And for example, if you did research, you're going to want one from
Hmm.
your PI, from your principal investigator, who has
Hmm.
seen you do all of that research. And so that letter is probably going to emphasize all of your research work, right? And then maybe you have a letter from you worked as a medical scribe for a year during your gap year, and you're going to want a letter from one of your clinical supervisors, maybe a physician who you worked with, right? And that's going to emphasize something different. It's going to emphasize your professionalism and your bedside manner and your other things. And then maybe you have one from your chemistry professor, and that's going to emphasize something different, like your study skills, or maybe you were a teaching assistant for that professor in organic chemistry, and it's going to emphasize like your ability to work with students and mentor them and tutor them and all that stuff, right? So it's not every letter has to be exactly the same. It's
Yeah.
understood that they're going to be different relationships and they're going to emphasize different things, right?
Yeah. I think too, what's nice is when students can actually give you examples that shows whether
Yes,
it's like their leadership skills, their or like clinical examples, just because then we can tell a story, right? We always talk about telling a story, but
yes,
I think that's almost like that proof of what type of person we're trying to convey that we see when we're working with that student within our clinical setting. In
exactly.
our case, obviously, if it's a research person, they only know you within that research setting, so they really need to know how you are outside of that research setting. So giving those like true examples that show where you showed those unique skills that you carry are very, very helpful to the person
Hmm.
writing their letter too.
Yeah. I will say that most letters they follow kind of a structure. And so when you're drafting your own letter, following this, I'm going to give you kind of like a generic structure for a letter. And it's important to kind of follow this because I've read thousands of letters of recommendation because I was on an admissions committee, and the vast majority of them followed this kind of recipe or this template, right? The first paragraph is sort of introducing themselves. So if I was writing a letter, I would introduce myself. I am an integrative pediatrician and owner of Healing Arts Pediatrics in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm also adjunct faculty and have third-year medical students rotate through my clinic from the University of Utah and Nordis College of Medicine and blah, blah, blah. And so give a little bit about myself because it's giving the person reading it, they're kind of asking, why should I value this person's opinion, right? Well, I'm telling you all of my qualifications so that why you should value my opinion, right? So the first
I'm legit,
paragraph,
all
and
right.
that,
I'm legit.
yes, so that paragraph you may or may not have to write, like don't worry about it. You could even just put brackets like I Dr. so and so and I met Sally when she started doing research in my lab as a sophomore in college. And then you can leave blank space for them to insert their qualifications, right? So that's going to be kind of paragraph 1. And then paragraphs 2 through 4 are going to be highlighting different strengths, right? So, for example, if you were doing research in my lab, then the second paragraph would be like, Sally has been assisting in creating mouse models for fibromyalgia in blah, 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 right? And then I would go into detail and then I would try to tell a story like Dr. Zulma said, right? From the beginning, Sally demonstrated eagerness for learning. She was willing to stay in the lab late in order to learn the skills necessary to conduct these experiments. And I was always impressed with her work ethic and her maturity, whatever it is. You highlight a couple of characteristics, maybe related to research. And then maybe in this next paragraph, I want to highlight something else. I want to highlight how Sally is a team player. So not only is she like smart and a hard worker, which I highlighted in paragraph 2, but she's also a really good team player. So then I can say, in addition to being a really smart member of our team or intellectually gifted, she also shows the great interpersonal strength and is a wonderful team player, right? That could be the thesis of my third paragraph. And then I would go into, I recall one instance when my graduate student had to be out sick for a month. Sally stepped in and she was willing to take on some of the responsibilities in order to help the team meet our project deadlines, right? And so that demonstrates, that little story demonstrates how Sally is also a wonderful team player and cares about everyone on the team. And then maybe another paragraph about, I don't know, something else about Sally that I've known. She shows excellent maturity for her age, right? And I know that she balances taking care of her mother together
Mhm.
with school load and together with this. And so I'm impressed by how she's able to manage her time and be a mature member of our team, right? So each of those paragraphs, of course, it's going to look different for you because your experience is going to be different and your personal characteristics that shine through that experience might be different. But I would say have like 3 core paragraphs highlighting different strengths and using actual anecdotes or experiences to demonstrate those strengths. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it can get tricky because you're obviously going to need more than one letter recommendation, so it can't
Yeah,
sound the same in each one.
exactly.
So you'll kind of have to spread out the great person that you are amongst all of the letter recommendations. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's hard to write about yourself because you feel like you're not being humble. So, I mean, you have
Mhm.
to put on the thinking cap, like, let me pretend I'm writing about a friend or a family member, but they have your traits, they have your journey. Maybe you think of it that way. And if you need to use somebody else's name as you're writing about it, I know some people
Uh-huh.
don't have an issue, but some people are like, no, I'll sound like I'm gloating too much about myself. Although
Yeah,
that's what we want you to
exactly.
do, right? But in a balanced way. But yeah, what you want to be careful is that not all the drafts sound the same, because then if not, you're going to be turning in multiple letter recommendations that have the same, that sound the same, and then you can just tell.
Mhm.
And it also
Yeah.
depends on the person who's writing it, how much they modify your draft as well.
Mhm. Yeah. There can be a little bit of repetition across letters. I mean, hopefully not all 3 professors or people ask you to write your letter. Usually it's just going to be like one of them that's going to ask you for that. So
Yeah.
there will still be some diversity, but maybe. I mean, some people may have
Yeah.
to do it multiple times. So you want to tailor what you write in that letter based on your interactions with that
Yeah.
person. So, for example, like what I'm going to write in my research mentor letter draft is going to be different than what I write in my letter from my supervisor as a scribe, right? Because I
Hmm.
interacted with those 2 people in very different ways,
Hmm.
and the examples that I can use are completely different from those 2 different
Hmm.
contexts. So I think that's how you can make those letters different is basically saying, okay, what did my clinical scribe supervisor see in me, right? They saw how I was really good at documenting, very detail oriented, very timely with my notes. They saw how I stepped in and helped interpret for a couple of patients when there was a need, and they saw like my communication skills shine through that and my
Hmm.
compassion towards patients. And then they also saw I worked for them for 18 months, and so they saw my growth and development over that period of time. So right, those are 3 different things than what my research mentor is going to know
Hmm.
about me. Maybe there's some overlap, but there were different scenarios, different contexts, different examples that can be highlighted in each of those.
Yeah, so you can highlight, say, that you're a team player, but in different ways in each scenario, because it depends how you are a team
Exactly.
player in each scenario. Yeah,
Exactly.
I agree with you. But do stay humble though.
Yeah.
Don't over exaggerate. But I think most of you guys are really good about it. Of not, I mean, I haven't had an experience where it's been too much. So, but it's
Hmm.
just so helpful, guys, if you can just do a draft for us, because we are busy, but we do want you
Hmm.
to get into medical school. Like, we feel so proud when you guys get into medical school. So, but
Exactly.
just if you do just provide that nice letter for us, and then we can just go in and modify it, it's really, really helpful.
Exactly. I will add just one more quick thing. Usually there's a closing paragraph too. I don't think when you're drafting you have to put too much focus on it, but usually the closing paragraph is going to be reaffirming the strong support. So I give my strongest recommendation for this student to your medical school. As I've shown, he or she has been blank, blank, and blank, right? I have no
Hmm.
doubt he or she will make an excellent physician and serve communities in need, right? Or something like
Hmm.
that. Or I recommend the student without reservation. And so just kind of like summing it up and bringing it all home in just like 3 sentences, right? And so that closing paragraph is important to just bring it all home. I think you don't have to worry too much about making it sound in the voice of the recommender, other than just making sure that the voice of the letter is professional, And
Yeah.
so once you
Yeah.
draft it, you could even use tools like Grammarly or ChatGPT to say, okay, I've written this letter. Please make minimal modifications, but change the voice to make it sound like a physician or a researcher or a professor, right? Like, so you can use tools
Mhm.
like that responsibly. Like Dr. Z said, don't oversell yourself. Sometimes I've seen many letters where the professor or the doctor writes, this student is in the top 5% of students I've ever worked with. I would say leave it up to them to add those details.
Yeah.
Don't do it yourself,
Mhm.
because it can come off as arrogant if like they read it and I'm like, actually, I don't agree with that. Right? Maybe you're in the top 20%, but not the top 5%, right? And you never know. It's hard to assess how they truly feel about that. And then final thing that I forgot to mention is make sure you give them enough time, right?
Yes.
We talked about this before. Give people at least a month to get a letter. And
Yes.
if they write you back and say, okay, I need you to draft it, get it back to them in a timely manner within 2 weeks, I would say. Ideally within a week, but maybe 2 weeks is a rough guideline. But if you waited until May 1st to ask for the letter and you need it in interfolio by May 15th, that's not good turnaround time. And then what if they email
Yeah.
you on May 10th saying, oh, I fell behind on my emails. Can you write a draft? Now you only have 5 days to write a draft, and then they have like a day or two to submit it. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time.
Yeah,
Anything
that
else
I
to
cannot
add, Dr.
stress
Z?
it. I mean, I can't stress that enough. Time. I think a month is a good rule of thumb for us to have enough
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
If the month passes, as we've mentioned before, you can do a kind reminder to the professor, the doctor, in case, because life happens for us too. But I think a month is a good rule of thumb and a good amount of time frame to give someone to write your
Uh-huh.
letter recommendation.
Definitely. All right.
Yep.
Well, I wish we could like help you write the letters directly, because we know it's a hard ask, but we'll try to maybe post some examples on our website, example letters of recommendation, and some of the language you might find in a good example. But if you do end up having to draft your own letter of recommendation, don't stress too much. It's not going to be the final version. It shouldn't be the final version. They just want more insight into what you see as your strengths, and they want examples that you can recall to really demonstrate those strengths. And that's how you can help save your professor or your physician or your mentor time in doing something for you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I hope you guys learned something from our episode today. And again, you guys can always reach out to us. You go to our website. We do have an email where you guys can contact us if there's questions. And then we like to build off episodes of things that you guys are wondering about. But do check out all of our podcast episodes, because we try to cover a lot of stuff from working with students. Okay. So good luck, everyone, and peace and love.
Until next time.